On this video, I'm gonna break down what I believe is the most toxic and self-limiting mind state you can have, whether you're a creative, producer, artist, entrepreneur, or just person trying to be successful.
Indy Jones, back with a trendy flow. I'm still trying to find my voice in this here scenario. Here we go.
Hey, what's going on? My name is Ruslan. I am a hip-hop artist, creative entrepreneur based in San Diego, California. I run a little small boutique mom and pop shop label called King's Dream Entertainment. And I've crossed paths with a lot of different artists, a lot of different creatives, a lot of different producers, graphic designers, cinematographers. And to me, what we're going to talk about on this video is the most self-limiting, devastating, crippling mentality that you could have as someone that's trying to become successful, regardless of what craft you have. And that mentality has seeped into a lot of different cracks and corners and modes and socio-political affiliations. And it's just a simple mentality. It's the simple philosophy that in order for one party or one person to be successful, that there's somebody on the flip side of that party or person getting finessed or getting taken advantage of. There's winners and there's losers. Now here's why this is such a toxic way of viewing the world, because it really creates a victim-like mentality. It creates a mentality that there's the people that are successful and they're successful because they've somehow taken advantage of people, and then there's people that aren't successful and it's because those are the people that have been taken advantage of. Now, obviously throughout history there's been a lot of injustice. There's been a lot of terrible things done to people that have been taken advantage of. So that's not to minimize any of that. What I'm talking about is today, in this modern context, with the level of technology that we have, with the level of opportunity that we have, to believe and trick yourself into believing that in order for one party to be successful, someone else has to be finessed or taken advantage of is just false. I don't care what level you're thinking at. Now, are there bad people out there taking advantage of people? Sure, there are, absolutely. But is the overwhelming majority of people that are trying to do business taking advantage of people? The overwhelming majority of artists and rappers and producers, are they trying to take advantage of people? And the answer to me is absolutely not. On this channel, we've been talking a lot about value. What are you willing to give up in order to get something? We talked about electricity, right? And rent and housing. You're willing to give up something in order to get said thing. You're willing to pay your electricity bill because you like electricity. Pay your rent because you like having a roof over your head. This is a concept, break it down simply, is known as capitalism. Capitalism is where we got a lot of our ideas of private property rights, of the idea of supply and demand, and the idea of a free market economy, which now with technology has just completely exploded. So with capitalism, it's not a perfect system, and if you have power in capitalism, you could definitely take advantage of people, but it is a good working system. I come from communism. I come from the former Soviet Union, so I know what it's like growing up in a different system. So I think it's the best system that we can work with right now within our modern context, and here's why. The idea of supply and demand really is what drives capitalism. Meaning, if you have a supply of something, you could have too much of a supply, not enough demand, and the product's not going to work. May not be valuable enough. Or there might be more demand than there is supply, which drives the price up. Here's a practical example. I live in Southern California. To buy a decent house in Southern California, it's about $500,000. That's not, we're not talking Beverly Hills. We're not talking about some place super bougie. We're literally just talking like, yo, this is a cool house, $500,000. That's in Southern California. Now, you might be living in a different part of the country, in Ohio, in the Midwest, in Texas, wherever. You might be like, yo, the rich are finessing the poor. It's not fair. It's wrong. And it's not. It's supply and demand. You know why it costs $500,000 to live in Southern California? Because there's more people that want to live in Southern California and are willing to pay more money to live in Southern California. Because someone is charging $500,000, it doesn't mean that the little guy isn't making it. It doesn't mean that someone is being suppressed from becoming successful. It just means, yo, you want to live by the water? Guess what? Just like everywhere else in the world that has water and oceans and beaches and climate control weather where it's summer year round, you're gonna have to pay more. You get what you paid for. Here's a business example of this. Nipsey Hussle did a Proud to Pay campaign a couple years ago. I'm not sure if it would work today, but he did a campaign where he dropped a mixtape, $100 a mixtape, and he sold 1,000 of them. And then he turned around, did another one, and he sold $1,000 mixtape, and he sold another 1,000 of them. I think Rock Nation or Tidal ended up buying like 100 of them. He has fans that are willing to pay $1,000 for his mixtape. Does that mean that the fans are getting finessed? Does that mean that the fans are getting taken advantage of? No. Supply and demand. He has 1,000 fans that are willing to pay, in my opinion, an astronomical rate for his mixtape. I'm not that big of a Nipsey Hussle fan, but that's how supply and demand works. That's how capitalism works, is that you have something and you're willing to set a rate, and sometimes the rate is too high and sometimes the rate is too low. So in my case, I'm an artist, I'm a creative entrepreneur, I do shows, I do speaking events. If somebody emails me and says, hey, we want to bring you out to speak and do a concert, and my reply is, what's the budget? That's a key question, by the way, when you get requested to do something. Creatives, freelancers, what's the budget? Unless you just have rates that you're not willing to compromise on. I still say it's a good question to lead into. And they say, yo, the budget is $10,000. I ain't never been paid $10,000 to do a show. What do you think I'm gonna say? Oh man, nah man, my $2,500. No, I'm gonna be like, cool, $10,000 to do a show. Now on my end, I'm gonna add as much value as I can. I'm probably gonna bring a live band with me. I'm really gonna make sure my presentation is super on point. I'm gonna try to add an equal amount of value, but I'm not taking advantage of the organization because they offered me a certain amount. I said, cool, like that's what y'all want to pay. You don't know whose conference this might be. There might be 50,000 people at this conference at a $1,000 ticket. My little $10,000 honorarium is a small drop in the bucket in comparison to what that event overall is generating. Or maybe it's someone that has a vision and wants to do this thing pro bono and they're coming out of pocket. I'm not finessing anybody, charging them a rate that they're willing to pay. Hopefully that makes sense. But what we're seeing today is there's a lot of creative people, a lot of people that have this just toxic mentality that I think is limiting. And it's just a philosophy that in order for one person to be winning, someone else has to be losing. And that's just not the way life works. Everybody can be winning. And this is how I view situations. I view situations like this. I say, what is the win-win for both parties? What is a success for both people involved? Whenever I'm trying to negotiate with somebody, when I'm trying to work with a new artist, when I'm doing a show, man, what does this person want out of this transaction, and how can I make this a win-win so both people feel good about the transaction? For somebody, it might just be paying that $1,000 for that Nipsey Hussle mixtape. They feel good about that. I'm not mad at that. Me and my wife, we want to buy a house in Southern California. We're willing to pay the rate to live by the beach where it's summer all the time. That is not being finessed or taken advantage of. What we don't want to do is slide into a victim mentality, is slide into the little guy can't get up, we can't make it. That's just not true. Here's some facts. 80% of millionaires today in America, today, are first generation rich, meaning they didn't inherit it, meaning they didn't win the lottery. They built a business and they built their net worth up to be $1 million. 80%. So if 80% of the people that are becoming millionaires are first generation rich, they don't come from wealth, they didn't win the lottery, they didn't inherit it, that means that anybody can become a millionaire if you have a talent, a skill, a product that's willing to add $1 million worth of value to somebody. A lot of this is just a mentality thing. A lot of this is we haven't been brought up to think in terms of abundance. We haven't been brought up to think in terms of how do you build a business? How do you add value to people? How do you solve a problem? Most of us, unfortunately, and even with the education system, and I love those of y'all that are in college, man, salute to you. It was one of the toughest seasons in my life. But even in the college education system, people are going, paying $50,000, $100,000, getting a student loan debt, and all you're doing is you're being trained to just be an employee. You're being trained to be a worker and not a boss. You're being trained to just do a task, work in a cubicle, and do something for somebody else and not build your own thing. And so I know this video might be challenging. It's supposed to be challenging. I want you guys to think through these mentalities when you're conducting business, when you're looking for a graphic designer or a producer or whatever you're looking for, man. Understand the amount of value you want added and be willing to pay the price, or be willing to invest the time and do it yourself. And no one has to take an L. No one has to be finesse. No one, you know what I mean? Like, everything is a value. Everything is supply and demand. It is a free market society, and free market societies usually, not all the time, saying this with some caveat, I know there's wealth disproportion, I know there's those things happening, but usually in a free market society, the best idea, the best product that's marketed the best wins. And notice I said the best product with the caveat that it's marketed well. So my question, and I just had this discussion with somebody on Twitter that was pushing back, and they were saying, you know, too many young artists are all about the marketing and the storytelling, and they're just trying to tell a story and build a movement. It's about the music, and I just want good music. And my pushback was, if you really have the best product, if you really have the best music, or just music that you think is exceptional, why would you not want to learn the marketing or outsource the marketing? Why would you not want to know how to better tell your story and package your product in a way that it can reach the most amount of people? Unless you're like, you want to be the starving artist and be the poor dude, and like, that's cool. That's not for me. Like, that's for the birds. If you ask me, I want to optimize and be as efficient as possible, reaching the most amount of people. And a lot of that comes from understanding how to do proper storytelling, how to market. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It doesn't have to be art or commerce. There's a beautiful intersection where you can have great art and marketed well, story told, sold well, so that more people get behind it. That is the beauty of the era that we're in right now. So I do my best to just stay away from binary thinking in general. Binary thinking is, there's only two ways. It could only be this or that. It could only be art or commerce. It could only be winners or losers. I just try to stay away from that, and I look for, how can we make the art and the commerce intermittent flow of each other? Meaning, how I'm thinking about the marketing and the rollout of the album while I'm making the album. I'm thinking about the visuals. I'm thinking about how I want to tell the story. I'm thinking about all these different things. They're not binary. They're not opposing ideas. They're the same. And that's, I think, the way a lot of newer artists, younger artists especially, are starting to approach social media music. And so if you're a great artist, don't look at the guys that are popping on Instagram and seeing how they're hacking culture. And we're going to talk more about this, artists that are hacking culture well. Yesterday's video was about Cardi B. Don't look at them and criticize them and judge them and be like, oh, they're just trolling, or no, they're doing things right. And what could we learn from them? What could we learn from them? What could we incorporate into our way of telling the story that we want to tell as creatives? And if we believe we have a better story, we believe we have a more positive story, we believe we have a story that's going to add more value, why not learn how to market and better tell that story? Let me know in the comment section below. Is this something you wrestle with? Is this something you struggle with? If you guys need some book recommendations, if you guys need some other things, one of the greatest books I've ever read is a book called The Millionaire Mind and The Millionaire Next Door. Maybe I'll do a book review about that next. It was really mind-blowing in terms of studying the minds of millionaires and how they thought about money, much different than how I thought about money at the time when I read it. And it started changing a lot of the things that I viewed and saw about money. So thank y'all for checking out this video, man. Really appreciate y'all. Peace.
I am so incognito. Far away from him. Incognito. Came in one way. Incognito. Not leaving the same. I'm going with the top down. Waiting for the countdown. All grace, no wishes. No loans, no interest. Feels good. Tony. Yeah. Tony. Little one shows. Stop. Running late here unannounced. Nothing worse than a game with no crown. And I don't fit in to pretend that you blend like a front out of town. God stepped in and said, oh, the accounts. Now you don't know what to do with the pounds. Take a view of the house, make it true till it's ours. I'm producing amounts. It's a nuisance, the house. I am so ouch.